Thanks for being here.
Absolutely.
I think we have
Lovely
to start
to
with
be-
the cobalt elephant in the room, which is that Emily has amazing hair today.
I do have blue hair.
It's so
Yes.
great.
It's very restoration, don't you think?
You know what? I absolutely believe that there were moments when the women were just dyeing their wigs whatever color suited their fancy. You do have to explain why your hair is blue, though, because it makes you sound very impressive.
Oh, yeah. Well, I had blue hair just because I had a quarantine breakdown, as so many of us have had. So I dyed my hair blue in July just for fun. And I had let it grow out. I wasn't planning on re-dyeing it, but then I auditioned for this commercial and they were like, "Oh my gosh, your blue hair is so amazing. You have to make it brighter. Like, will you please dye it again and make it brighter?" And I was like, okay, I'm like doing this restoration show right now, but totally. So I redyed my hair and now it is so bright.
It's so bright.
And I love it. I didn't think that I was going to like it as much as I did, because I was kind of tired of having to take care of it, but it's very fun. And so now I'm just bringing the electric blue into the restoration.
It also looks so smooth.
Yeah.
Like, it looks...
I know.
It's really nice.
Mm-hmm.
Well, and you're playing Helena in The Rover, who is one of dramatic literature's very best young female rebels. And I absolutely believe that if Helena was living today, she would dye her hair blue, if only to piss off her older brother.
I completely agree.
Yeah.
I completely agree.
Seems like a stunt she would pull, especially if she was, like, rebelling against... I mean, I don't know what the modern version of a nunnery would be. Maybe an all-girls Catholic high school.
Yeah, I feel like the modern version would be like she got shipped off to boarding school.
Yeah, absolutely. Yep. Exeter. And then her first Thanksgiving break, she comes home. Just absolute electric blue.
And like a nose ring. That her roommate did. That's totally what Helena would have done.
And like she had like an allergic reaction to it. Like her nose is still a little bit red. Yeah. Well, fantastic preamble to what we're talking about today. To anyone listening, thank you so much for joining us. I'm Claire Martin. I'm the Assistant Artistic Director of Sweet Tea Shakespeare. I'm joined today by two of my favorite women in the whole world and people that I am just really lucky to call colleagues, Jillian or Jill Robinson and Emily Garrison. Anyone who's listened to our show may have seen one of or both of their beautiful faces before. They've both joined me for cocktail hours in the past. For a bit of context, Jill is my intrepid production manager and head of stage management for the Digital Restoration series, which is a 6-month all-virtual interrogation of drama from the late 17th and early 18th centuries that Sweet Tea is embarking on between now and March of 2021. She is stage managing 4 entire full-cast, fully produced audio dramas and facilitating a series of table reads, and she's also just like the person who keeps me tethered to sanity. I'm very grateful for her. And Emily Garrison, I mean, I've known her since we were like 7, so it's difficult to know where to begin, but Emily has been with me on this kind of virtual theater adventure since the beginning of the summer, basically. She was in the first audio drama I directed, Marlowe's Dr. Faustus, and then fortuitously and beautifully played Marwood, the femme fatale of William Congreve's The Way of the World, which we rehearsed and recorded in July and which drops on Patreon on Monday, 2 days from now. Yay! And the first episode, which is Act 1 of 5, is going to drop on the Sweet Tea Shakespeare Hours podcast on Monday. So the whole public will be able to listen to Act 1 of this play. And we're going to be talking about that today and what it was like to work on that nutty project. And she is currently playing the inimitable Helena in Afrabane's spectacular restoration comedy, The Rover, which we are in week 5 of 7, I think, is where we're at. And so we're also going to talk about that today because she's playing one of the greatest characters ever and doing a beautiful job. And really today is just a day for the 3 of us to convene, chat about the DRS, about Restoration Theater and why we're doing it, why we're excited about it, and also just sort of share our own personal experiences with this project because it is multi-pronged and multifaceted, and really exciting. At least I think so. So thank you both so much for being here. Yeah, like, welcome to the table.
Yay!
Thank you.
Can I just say too, like the nerdy dramaturg in me is loving that this is sort of like a modern day, like you said, Claire, of this being an afternoon tea or just like a lunch hour with the ladies. Like,
Sure.
I just think it's so appropriate in today's day and age. We're digitally just airing things out and talking about things that we love, like
and capturing the town gossip. The
Totally.
most important part of
Exactly.
any tea time.
I feel like we should have had the actors sign a very specific waiver that, like, a willingness to let us just wildly gossip about them during the session. I'm of course, I'm like the Neanderthal American because I'm not drinking tea. I'm drinking really, really strong coffee to help me wake up. Those of you who are on the East Coast may not realize that I'm on the West Coast. So it's only 11 a.m. and it's 11 a.m. on a Saturday, which is like 9 a.m. on a weekday. So I'm drinking.
I didn't even get out of bed until 11 a.m. today.
But then you go to bed at like 4 a.m. So that is perfectly
true.
Understandable.
That is true.
Nice.
So, I mean, I think we should start. I mean, we really should start at the beginning with like what the DRS even is. But before we get there, I would love for both of you just to say a little bit about what working on the rover has been like, why you're here today, and just what the project is for each of you.
Mm-hmm. Em, do you want to go first?
Yeah, totally. So working on the rover has been really, really fun, I think, for two primary reasons. I think, first of all, it's written by a woman, which I will be the first to say, like, going into working on these restoration comedies, I did not even know that there were female playwrights from this era. And I think it is so cool to see how some of these plays deal with like the themes of like what it means to be a woman writer and be a woman in society. And it's so cool to get that perspective. And then I think that, Claire, you've done such an amazing job of making these plays that, like, for someone like me who has very little experience doing restoration plays, they're so accessible. Like, every day we like go into rehearsal and we just were like, okay, like, let's talk about what these people are actually saying and what they're actually wanting. And it takes these things that, like, for me, I came in when we first started working on Way of the World was the first restoration show that I did. I being like, I have no idea who this writer is. I have no idea what these plays are about, which can be really scary as an actor, going in like completely blind like that. And they've just all been so delightful and so fun, and that has carried over to the rover as well. So that's been a really fun surprise.
Mm-hmm.
I'm so glad.
Yeah, absolutely. Kind of picking up what you're putting down too, Emily. My undergrad, I went to theater and drama studies program at University of Toronto and Sheridan College. I'm up here in the Great White North in Canada. I'm Canadian, for those of you who don't know. No worries. Currently bubbled in Windsor, Ontario, but I'm usually living in Toronto, Ontario. So I went to University of Toronto and Sheridan College. So my whole theater undergrad was kind of a mixture of approaching theater in a practical sense or a theoretical based sense from the University of Toronto. So there were courses available at University of Toronto that touched on the Restoration, touched on the Enlightenment period, touched on Elizabethan period, but the practical side of the program was first and foremost. So if you weren't able to take some of those electives, then you kind of missed out on getting really into the nitty gritty of those different eras of theater. So I actually was able to do a scene study of the Beaux Stratagem. I got to play the romping Mrs. Sullen from that play. But again, I remember that was the Restoration era was only practically highlighted for, I want to say, 2 weeks in my whole 4 years of study. So it was a tidbit, and then it was like, by Restoration unless you encounter it in the world yourself. So coming into this project was so awesome because, again, I'm very much like a brainiac as well as a theater maker. So anytime that I can dig into the history and learn about the outside stuff to bring to the stage, I jones about it so hard. So coming into this project, I was so excited because I'm like, yes, okay, this was the course that like I missed out on at U of T because it wouldn't fit in. And now we have like a 6-month intensive of just going back and learning. And like you said, Emily, like I had heard of Afroban, I've heard of Nell Gwyn, but I never really like had them highlighted, which is very sad to think too. But now we have 6 months of really getting to know these women and their words, and doing it in 2020, like Emily was saying too, the themes, the idea about sex, the idea about politics, all of these things are so relevant to today. So it seems like such an interesting happenstance that like, you know, I missed out on this sort of like chunk of theater history, and now it's coming back to me at such like an amazing time, you know? And then just working on the Rover specifically has been so amazing. Like the energy that comes into the room, albeit a Zoom room because these are all being digitally operated. But it's so fun because you can feel each other's chemistry and energy between each other, even though it's through a screen. Yeah. And so that's really cool too, to also get that sort of text placed now in a digital lens. So it just adds like another layer into investigating these plays. Yeah. Yeah. So it's an amazing wild ride, and I'm so excited to dig further in. Yeah.
And as far as I know, it's unprecedented. If only because we have not been in a global pandemic during the digital age ever, right? As a society. And so even if there have been theater companies in the past, and I'm sure there have been, and I'm sure I just haven't done enough research, who have decided, whatever, we're going to do a full season of restoration drama, or we're going to devote, you know, X amount of time to really interrogating these plays. I'm sure that has happened in the past, but it's been in a more traditional context where you have heartbeats in a room, right? You have actors and director and designers that are just in the same space making theater the old way, the traditional way. I don't know that there's ever been a concentrated long-form virtual exploration of restoration theater because there's never needed to be. Right. And I mean, the three of us have spent good number of hours on Zoom now. And I think we're figuring it out. I mean, by the time we got through Faustus was such a learning curve for me. And Emily, you were there. You were a part of that, right? Like you watched me in real time being like, is this how you do theater online? Is this how you is this how you give feedback to actors when you were only receiving, you know, ones and zeros from them? But by the time we got to Way of the World, I think all of us had settled a bit, or we were at least starting to get used to the idea of trying to tell stories through a screen. And now, I mean, Emily was also a part of our and actually so was Jill, our all-women Two Gentlemen of Verona, which we called No Gents, Two Gents, which we did in August. And so now, I mean, Emily, you and I are on number 4 of these. And we're starting to, like, I think we're starting to harness what Zoom can and can't do. And, like, we're harnessing what it can do. We're accepting what it can't do. And we're finding ways to build community and build a sort of sense of camaraderie and community, even though we can only ever be thus.
Absolutely.
Yeah, something that's been really fun about the Rover specifically, I think, is I feel like, now that we've had a couple of experiences on Zoom, like Faustus had a huge cast. We were just figuring out how Zoom worked, and that was still a really fun experience. But it clearly was like every day we would kind of be like, how do we record our voices? Yeah. Like, how do we do these things? And then Way of the World, which was a very small cast, so we really got to focus on like character building and relationships. No Gens, Two Gens, we were really exploring like dramaturgy a lot. Something that's been fun about the Rover is I feel like we figured out how to do all of those things virtually. So now we get to like keep adding on to that and bringing in props and bringing in ways to make us all unified in this virtual world, like starting to experiment with costumes and masks and other props. So every time I feel like we get to explore something that's a little bit different and like take it like just like the next step, which I think is especially nice given that virtual theater is going to be our reality for a while, and to kind of really see what we can do with it rather than just kind of be like, okay, well, Zoom theater is people speaking to a screen. That's what it is. So that's what we're going to do, you know?
Mm-hmm.
So we should talk about the DRS, because then we should sort of go into the parts of it. I'm from a dramaturgical background, the pedagogy of Dr. Jeff Prohl, which is perennially asking the question, what are the parts of this thing and how do they go together? So we should explain what the DRS is so we can talk about the parts and how they go together. It's a strange thing to explain, but the DRS, or Digital Restoration Series, is essentially a 6-month virtual interrogation into restoration drama and drama of the 18th century, through a distinctly feminist lens, but also a 2020 pandemic lens, because we're looking at the plays with questions. We're looking for guidance and inspiration, and pitfalls, as we, as a sort of, well, for right now, North American society, reckon with what the dark times of coronavirus means for art and storytelling. If we cannot make theater in the way that we all think about theater, which is people in a room together, telling stories for other people that are in the room with them, and it is a present, exciting human transactional live experience. If theater can't be that, what is theater going to be for us in our interregnum, right? In our in-between time, but also what kinds of stories are we going to tell, and what kind of artists are we going to want to hear from, and what themes are we going to prioritize on the other side, right? When we can finally be heartbeats in a room again. Like, what is that theater going to be like? How is it going to be perhaps, celebratory and triumphant? And how is it going to be different than what it was going in? Which is what happened during the Restoration. The actual Restoration of England refers to the restoration of the English monarchy after sort of a 9-year, quote-unquote, sort of dark time when a Puritan government kind of foisted out the young Charles II, whose father, Charles I, had been executed by the state. And there was this kind of Puritan theocratic rule of England, with no king. And that's where we get the idea of the interregnum, right? The time between regents, the time between kings. And then when and that was when the theaters were shut down, because theater was considered lewd and inappropriate and, sinful, and duplicitous. And so all of the theaters were shut down. And even though, there were plays written, they were all closet dramas. Nothing was being performed live with other people. And then Charles II came back, which is a very simplistic way of describing what happened at the end of the interregnum. But basically he came back and was restored to the English throne. He became King Charles II. And he had this sort of continental sensibility for theater because he had spent a lot of time in France and Italy and on the continent, watching plays and being transformed and thrilled by them. And part of that thrill was seeing women on the stage, which had not been legal in England. Hadn't been a thing when he left. And so he comes back, he's newly situated on the throne, he's a very red-blooded 27-year-old man, and he decides, right, like, we're not only going to reopen the playhouses, I'm not only going to license 2 theater companies to create this kind of dramatic duopoly, but also I'm going to pass, whatever legislation needs to be passed so that women can be on the stage, so we can have female actors, or actresses as they called them then, for the first time. And with that new wave of new bodies and perspectives and voices on the stage, we also get this wave of female playwrights, right? Like Aphra Behn, Susanna Saint-Livre, and Mary Picks, and, Catherine Trotter, and all of these amazing women who pick up a quill and start writing, because they're like, well, if the women can be on stage too, we can be writing alongside our brothers. And I really, really believe that we are on the verge of a theatrical restoration, and that the theater that we make on the other side of this coronavirus debacle is going to be simultaneously a sort of triumphant jubilee, because we are all going to be so happy to be with each other, to be present with friends and neighbors in a room. But I think it's also going to be markedly different than the theater before, because I think that we will have different priorities, we will have different questions, we will be worried about different things. Depending on what happens with the 2020 election, we may be a very, very politically fraught society, and I don't think there's a way that we couldn't be, no matter who wins. But there will come a time when we're back in the room together and we're looking at each other, and the world is different. The world has been changed by the interregnum, by the dark time of no theater, and we've all been changed by it. And so these plays are just speaking to me right now. I find the themes incredibly resonant. I find the characters, especially the female characters, like staggeringly inspiring and really incisive. The social critique is top notch. The political satire is amazing. The sort of exhoriating critique of marriage and sex and money is like really, really prescient and fresh. And I think that Afra Bain was doing it right, like as Dr. Freeman would say, par excellence, right? Like her play is pretty much like the creme de la creme of restoration dramas. And so yeah, I think that exploring these plays, and I think offering actors the chance to like sink their teeth into these really meaty characters who have these really like gnarly lines is, I think it's like both empowering and kind of just like moving, because it's a reminder that society has made it through the dark times before, right? We will do it again. Theater will go on. There will be a restoration. We just have to have like the patience and fortitude to get there. So, yeah.
And Claire, just to talk to that too, going back to the structure of these texts and the big slab of meat they are to dig your teeth into. Yeah, from an actor point of view as well, like this, for people who aren't maybe as like theater savvy, restoration comedy has the same sort of mouth work needed for like a Shakespeare. Yeah. Like the phrases are so voluptuous and not modern in the mouth. So the fact that they are restoration comedies as well, as a performer, you have a double duty you have to do, because you not only have to own that rich text, but with a layer of comedy icing on top. Yeah. So like that is, I'm using a lot of food references here. But that is what. Yeah, maybe that's it. I am drinking vanilla biscotti coffee, so maybe I'm inspired by my palate is inspired. Great. But that's been a very amazing, almost workshopping experience from the acting side of it too, of having your brain really modernize or normalize the phrases you're speaking, first of all, but then also not forgetting like the human comedic qualities that come with the words you're saying. So it's like your brain is split, and then you have to marry them. So it's kind of hard to explain, but from a performer, like this whole project too is an amazing during a time where we don't have necessarily like workshops or stages to exercise our articulators and the way that, you know, how do I say this, or like what are my gestures doing, like with this happening sort of like on a Zoom platform. It's sort of like a scope into, as an actor, a scope into, okay, well, let's try this. Let's kind of take the stress off of memorizing lines verbatim, or take the stress off of physically needing to know what the lower half of my body is doing. Mm-hmm. And let's like really train our brain to like gobble up this text and say it in a way that makes sense and tells the story. So that's just like another really cool layer that only having kind of like this up and your mouth and facial gestures to work with, it allows us to kind of ease into what can come across as like heightened text, if that makes sense.
Oh, it's high. It's high.
Yeah, I don't know if Emily, like, do you feel the same?
I actually feel a little bit differently, which is it's an interesting it's interesting to hear that perspective. I think that I find restoration much easier to access than Shakespeare is. And maybe this is just that, like, I, who love Shakespeare, it's my favorite, classical acting is my favorite form, but I don't find that it comes naturally to me. I find working through Shakespeare a really difficult job to do, to really think about what you're saying and figure out how to say it and how to connect with someone. And I feel like that is really what I expected going into restoration, that it was going to be, if anything, even more difficult, because I didn't have this like previous exposure to the plays. But I found them quite easy to access, I think, in a really delightful way. I think I've said to Claire in rehearsal a couple of times how surprised I am how much these characters sound like they could be in 2020. I think especially in The Rover, that's something that I've really noticed. And even when we were working on Way of the World, I was thinking, like, this could take place at a high school. Everyone just wants to have more gossip than everyone else, and have more status than everyone else. But I mean, of course, the language is heightened, but I've actually been surprised by how much easier I've found to sort of slog through it than I usually find classical texts.
That's right. Yeah, that is really interesting. And I think it's a testament to the best restoration playwrights, right? That their language does have a kind of timelessness to it, or at least what the characters want. Their desires are just so accessible that it almost makes the language accessible, even if they're saying 1,000 words. But I also think that sometimes the characters they're using language as a defense mechanism. They're using language as a guard, especially in The Way of the World. I talked to the amazing director, Lindsay Turner, for like 3 hours on a Zoom call one day before we jumped into Way of the World, because I wanted the perspective of a professional who had dealt with the text before, and specifically did a resto-modern hybridic production where the women were all in quasi-restoration outfits, but that were also partly inspired by individual. They all had their own designer. So like Lady Wishfort was like Gucci plus restoration, and Marwood was like Dolce & Gabbana plus restoration. And she, had like Lady Gaga music in her show and strobe lights. And so I wanted to talk to someone who had found a way to like drag Congreve's play, possibly kicking and screaming, into the 21st century. And the thing that she said that I think is so brilliant is that the characters in that play, at least, are using language like pepper spray. Stay away from me. Stay away from my heart. I do not want you to see that I am scared and, self-conscious and vulnerable. I don't want you to be able to access the parts of myself that feel raw and tender, because this is a world where to show weakness is to lose status. And vulnerability is weakness. And as Millimant says in Way of the World, cruelty is power. One's cruelty is one's power. And that's a really, really bleak worldview. But it is the worldview that they all hold, right? And they cling to these characters of this upper echelon. They cling to this glossy illusion that is beautiful but hard and brittle and fundamentally lacking in, real love and connection. And yet they're all striving for it. They're all trying to find it wherever they can. And in The Rover, we have at the center of the play a young woman who's just determined even just to have one night of connection. She's willing for it to just be 24 hours worth, but she desperately wants to know what it is like to feel love physically and emotionally at least once, because she knows that her life will be barren in some way if she doesn't find it. So So the parts of the DRS are very sort of exciting, and it's kind of weird to describe it because Emily, you were with me for Way of the World. We didn't know what it was going to be or like what we were on the brink of when we did that one. That was just another summer audio drama that we were doing alongside Faustus and No Gents, Two Gents. Retroactively, it has become part 1 of the digital restoration series. And as we said, like the full play is dropping on Patreon on Monday, and episode 1, which is Act 1 of 5, is dropping on our podcast on Monday. So people, the general public, go to the Sweet Tea Shakespeare Hours podcast. You'll be instantly transported to the Chocolate House, which is a gentleman's club in London in 1700, and you can listen to our motley male heroes like lose money at the poker table and make really sly accusations about each other's wives. So that was technically became part 1, but the digital restoration series was really born in August because of support that Sweet Tea Shakespeare received from the Arts Council of North Carolina, Arts Council of Fayetteville and Cumberland County. So thank you for that. And so we have 5 complete audio dramas, and that is The Way of the World, The Rover, which we are currently rehearsing, The Man of Mode by George Etheridge, which is coming later this winter, which Emily is also in and which Jill is stage managing. And then a double bill in early 2021. This is the infamous Stratagem Project, which is 2 plays in rep. So one cast is doing both of them at the same time. And that is George Farquhar's 1707 Rollicking Romp, The Beaux Stratagem, which Jill already mentioned, and a late 18th century Enlightenment proto-feminist rewrite of that play called The Belles Stratagem by Hannah Cooley, which she wrote about approximately 10 months before England lost the American Revolution and lost all of the American colonies. So she's looking at her own government, she's looking at the British Empire, she's coming out of a half century of quote-unquote sentimental comedy, which was just like really, really conservative, boring theater. And she's looking back to the Restoration, and she's thinking, like, where did that go? Where did the liberty and the licentiousness and the satire and the social critique, like, that's what we need. That's what feels alive and important to me as a young woman living in London. And so she writes this amazing, beautiful, classical homage, I suppose, to the Restoration writers called The Belles Stratagem, in which all of the devious scheming and planning of the play is done by the women. And so those are our 5 shows. And then we also have a series of 3 table reads, which are also going to be full cast, where I do an adaptation of a script. I send it out a couple weeks ahead of time to a full cast. Everybody rolls up on the day, and we record it in a one-shot on Zoom. And whatever happens, happens. And Emily and Jill were both a part of the first one in that series, which was William Wycherley's just bananas comedy, The Country Wife, which is like, it's like the sex comedy of Restoration.
So good.
Emily played Lady Fidget, the first of the Rake Harry Horner's conquests, and definitely the most outspoken of the bunch.
Yeah, she knows what she wants.
Totally. Definitely a virtuous gang. Also, Emily's partner, Duncan Gallagher, played Harry Horner, so it was fun to see the two of them embark on that together. They're also going to play lovers for me upcoming in The Man of Mode. They are playing Emilia and Harry Belair, the young ingenue lovers, in the middle of, like, the wild sex games of everybody else. And I played Alethea Pinchwife, the younger sister of jealous husband Pinchwife, who's kind of the play's antagonist. And Alethea is the ingenue who's trying very hard to cling to her ideals, and yet is feeling a really sort of unbelievable attraction to a man that she's not engaged to, and is sort of having an existential crisis about it. Jill was our facilitator. She also played Harry Horner's boy, his little servant that's always announcing all of the unwelcome company that he's receiving. The next up in that series is Mary Pix's The Beau Defeated, which is another kind of early feminist response to the tropes of the rake. Sir John Roverhead in that play is he's like a precursor to Jane Austen's Willoughby, if anyone knows Sense and Sensibility. That's kind of what Roverhead is. But that play is dominated by women. A core of like 6 main female characters drive the Beau Defeated, and it is such a romp. And it's looking at women of different ages too, which is really interesting. The ingenue in that play is only like 17, but some of the women are in their 50s. So it's this really interesting look at sort of women across the sliding scale of age. And then the last play in that table read series is William Congreve's Love for Love. I have a special thing for Congreve, so I wanted to do 2 of them. And the reason we're doing Love for Love is because Congreve wrote it 5 years before The Way of the World for a company of actors that he sort of fell in love with. And so when he finally wrote his masterpiece, Way of the World, he actually crafted the characters specifically for the actors in a way that was even more personalized than it was for other playwrights during the Restoration. He wrote every single role specifically for each individual actor because he had, on some level, a really deep understanding of who they were as a person. And so Emily Garrison, who played Marwood in The Way of the World, the incredible villainess, and just kick-ass woman, the actress who played Marwood originally, Elizabeth Barry, was a rock star. She was one of the first female celebrity actresses in England. She was the original Helena in The Rover, so Emily's playing another one of her girls, which she did when she was 19. Elizabeth Barry played Helena when she was just 19, and played Marwood when she was 42. But when she was 37, she played Mrs. Frail, the femme fatale of Love for Love, and Congreve, I think, realized at that point what an extraordinary actor she was, and so he wrote Marwood for her 5 years later. So we are, to sort of celebrate that fact, we're bringing back all the actors who were a part of Way of the World, and the whole group of us, all 14 of us, are going to play our kind of analog characters in Love for Love, which should be a lot of fun. And then in the meantime, I'm just doing a bunch of podcasts and interviews with scholars and artists who specialize in this theater because they know way more than I do. And at the helm of that sort of podcast project is an incredible woman named Dr. Misty Anderson, who we are so lucky to have in our sphere. She's a co-founder of the R18 Collective, which is an online digital society of artists and scholars who specialize in restoration and 18th century drama from all over the world. She is the head of English at the University of Tennessee. She's actually joining us tomorrow night at Rover Rehearsal to do a presentation on Afrobane, which I'm so excited about. And she will probably be appearing on the show. You will probably see her and hear her voice. She's been offering just like indispensable advice and insight into not only the content of these plays, but the world that these playwrights were living in and that the actors were living in, just what the Restoration was and what it meant. So that's the DRS. That's like what we're embarking on. And the first up in that series was The Way of the World. And because it's dropping on Monday, oh my God, it's dropping on Monday. That is like crazy. I want to talk about it a little bit. And I want to give Emily a chance to talk about it because Emily played possibly the best character. And did it just,
in my opinion,
did a
she's the best
beautiful
character.
job. And I think both of us have really connected to that play and really connected to our characters. So, Em, I would love for you to just start. Like, what was The Way of the World for you? Like, what does it mean to you?
Yeah, so sort of like I said before, Way of the World was the first time I had ever read or worked on a play from the Restoration. So I came in feeling very intimidated. I had never worked on a play from this period before. I really didn't know the tropes or the context of the shows. And it was it's just a delightful surprise because it is such, especially Way of the World, I think, is such just like a little catch of humanity. And it's so easy to follow why these characters want what they want. And I was playing Marwood, who is kind of blinded by jealousy and ambition to be the best. And that, I think, particular journey was something that I think is like just so wrenching and so easy to latch onto. So I loved playing her. And I remember something we did, I think on like the first, I I think we did it on the first and last rehearsals, if I remember, was in our first rehearsal, Claire had us say, like, what Shakespeare character do you think the character you're playing in Way of the World is? And I had read the script once at that point. Like, I had never heard it with other people. And I think I said something like very... I honestly don't remember what I said I might have said like Lady Macbeth, like something very confusing.
I think you said Goneril from Lear.
Oh, that's actually not a terrible analysis.
I think it was a Lear lady.
But I definitely went in and I was like, oh, she's kind of mean. I'll choose a mean character. Like, I had no idea. But I did love doing that little exercise. One, because it's just fun to like hear what Shakespeare shows people love, but also I feel like it's such a great way into a show that you have no context working with. Like, okay, everyone who's in this cast like knows Shakespeare really well and loves Shakespeare. Like, let's just think about it. And then by the end of the show, I was like, Marwood is Iago. Full stop, period. Like, that is who she is. She will do anything to get what she wants. She will manipulate anyone. She will lie to anyone, and she will hide it all. Soon as she is with one. I love the process of discovery for that. So yeah, Way of the World was a very special place in my heart, especially that portion, because it was just such a fun thing to work on. If like people who are listening, looking forward to the podcast that's going to drop, I think like something to really keep in mind, like to look forward to, is how human these people are. I think that was one of my biggest discoveries about the restoration as well, is that these are just people. They're just like us who happen to need to use status and wit and beauty and family lineage to get what they want. But they want the same things as us. They just need to get them in different ways. So that was a great show to work on. Really fun.
Oh, I love that. And I played Millamant, who's the sort of ingenue of that story, but she's very pissed about being the ingenue. And she offers this really interesting, Alex Stroud, who played Mrs. Fainall, she called it counterculture, this counterculture perspective, because Millamant's sort of great scene in that play, the infamous proviso scene, is not really ultimately about any of the arbitrary provisos she's laying out for her marriage contract. I don't think she actually cares about any of them. What she cares about is making her suitor and the man she loves with all her heart understand that he will never own her. He will never be able to tell her what to do. She will never be his property. She will never be his obedient wife. And she's trying to scare him into admitting that that's what he wants, because she's desperately afraid that if she commits her hand and her heart, that she will be duped and taken advantage of, and that all of her money will be squandered, and she will just be forced to sit at home and accept that he will treat her however he wants. And she can't do it, no matter how much she loves him. Marriage is not worth that. And so she's trying to frighten him with a list of reasons why she's not going to be the stereotypical 1700 wife. And his response is primarily to tease her about it, and also to sort of, assure her, never gonna happen. It's not why I love you. I love you because of this. I love you because this is what you are. And Marwood and Millamant go head to head in that play. They have an extended fight that I really hewed down when I was cutting the script, but when we do it live, I will absolutely be incorporating some of that text back in. But they do have like a mean girl cat fight in the sitting room. Which first there's like a maid there, and then like Millamant sends the maid away so they can get really mean without there being a witness. Every single time we did that scene, Emily, I thought I was having more fun than I've ever had before. I hope you did too, because I loved our cat fight.
Yeah, what I really loved about that scene is I feel like with men, because Marwood sees men as opportunities.
Right.
And she does not feel that way about women. Women are her, like, the things getting in her way. Like, I think if Marwood had what she wanted, she would just, like, destroy every woman on earth who wasn't her, because she just wants everything for herself. And so what's really fun about that scene is, like, after so many scenes of Marwood holding everything in because she's in the presence of men, she finally is not, and she gets to really say how she feels. And also that scene is so fun because she loses. It just is like, Millamant really tears her apart in that scene. And she needs that, like.
Yeah, I know, absolutely. But they're getting under each other's skin because of emotion. They're getting under each other's skin because they both like the same guy. And like, that was the moment. It was coming out of that, one of our recordings of that scene, that I texted Emily, like, or no, Emily texted me. She's like, these people are all in high school. I don't care how old they are. They're all just high schoolers. And and that was where we sort of like began to devise what will eventually become like a Netflix miniseries that is just the way of the world set in like a modern San Diego high school.
Yes.
Because there is something so just like accessibly catty and anxious about the way these characters behave.
And what I think's so fun about imagining them as high schoolers is, like, to high school, I feel like to high school students, and this was certainly true of me, so I am dragging myself along with this, but it's just like, when you're 16 years old, every single thing you do is the most important thing you have ever done.
Yeah.
Like, when you walk into school, it is the most important day of school. Like, when you go to your locker, it's the most important time you've ever been to your locker. And so, like, when you see someone that you love, or when you see someone who gets the person that you love, like, it is just, like, overwhelming. Like, when you're 16 years old, your body just can't hold on to these emotions. And I think that the women in The Way of the World and in the Restoration really feel that. I really, like, their emotions are just too big for their bodies. And especially in that moment.
Totally. And so now we're into The Rover, which is female playwright Aphra Bain's it's kind of her response to Thomas Killigrew's play Tommaso, which I think never really made it out of the gate of being a closet drama. I think there were a couple times they tried to produce it and it like never really happened, but that came out during the interregnum, so it was a time of no theater. But she's looking at Tommaso, which is all about a rover, a rake, you know, on the hunt, on the prowl for women. And she's looking at the plays that her contemporaries are writing right at the first wave of the Restoration. So she's looking at Wycherley's The Country Wife, and she's looking at George Etheridge's The Man of Mode, and she's thinking about these big, broad, sexy comedies. And she's like, wow, none of these plays have an authentic female perspective. None of them. How could they, right? They were written by privileged men. And so she takes up the pen and she writes The Rover, which centers women and the female perspective, and specifically like the female gaze, which is really interesting to me. But she centers her story on this pair of sisters, Florinda, who is the elder sister and is very much the Mrs. Fainall, right? She's the graceful swan. She has wisdom. She has gravitas. She is in love with a man who loves, you know, her soul, and she loves his soul, and it's not sexual, and it's not like, I mean, I think it is sexual, but it's not, I guess,
it's not just sexual.
No, it's not just sexual.
Yeah.
And is like the giver of wisdom. And she has this younger sister who's a teenager who's just a brat and absolutely a rebel, and has been consigned to a nunnery by her family where she's supposed to like become a nun and just live the rest of her life in prayer. And of course Desiree doesn't want to do that. And is with her sister and her older brother Don Pedro in Naples. They're a Spanish family in Italy. And she and her sister decide to sneak out of the house in masquerade and attend the Neapolitan carnival. And her sister is chasing after her Romeo and Juliet love, like this really like lovely down-to-earth English soldier. And meanwhile, Helena is like, I just want to have some fun. I gotta have some fun before I'm locked up in a nunnery for the rest of my life. And I think the fun should start with a hot guy. and and so it's this really amazing play. It's called The Rover, and ostensibly the Rover is the Rake character Wilmore, who is another English soldier, who's also in Italy. But I think the Rover is really Helena. Because she's roving around. She's looking for a person. She's looking for a place. She's looking for excitement and adventure, and breaking every rule of decorum she has to, including dressing like a boy and like setting aside her own gender and gender roles and gender norms in order to chase after what she wants. And the play is rollicking. There is like no character in the play that's like middle-aged. Like Aphra Bain gives us a play of like 20 young characters, and I say young like 20s, 30s. So everybody is young and hot, and it's in Italy, where everyone is young and hot, almost by law. And it's this like really like it's this romp. It's a really exciting and ferociously feminist take on gender politics and the repartee and the marriage plot and the sexual politics of Restoration comedies. Emily is playing the incredible heroine protagonist, Helena, the young girl, who is, chasing after what she wants. I'm playing her cousin, Valeria, which was sort of a late game change, just like playing Millamant in Way of the World. It wasn't actually supposed to happen, but then it did. And it's been so much fun, Emily, to play your cousin and to just like romp around the streets of Italy with you and Andrea in our masquerade masks, which I have mine right here. I'm sure Emily does too. Yeah, there we go. Oh yeah, coming at you.
It goes well with the blue, I think.
No, it absolutely does. It's very pretty. Jill is playing Moretta, the waiting gentlewoman to Angelica Bianca, the famous courtesan that sort of sets all the men in a tizzy, and has some of the best sass lines in the whole play.
So fun.
And so, yeah, Jill is also stage managing The Rover and has been a part of every artistic conversation we've had about it. So, Jill, I'd love for you to talk a bit about The Rover, and then we can pass it over to Emily. And yeah, just talk to me about this show.
Yeah, absolutely. So yeah, this show, it's my first part of the DRS that I'm coming in as stage manager, and I'm coming in as actor. So that's been like a very interesting double duty to do. And in a previous cocktail hour with Claire, I kind of bled into this a little bit already, but I feel like an octopus some nights in rehearsal, when especially I'm called as an actor as well, because there's just a lot of admin stuff to obviously be absolutely on top of, and then Moretta, she kind of just has to find her way onto the screen, creep in past all the highlighting and the note taking I'm taking. So that's been a really fun experience, kind of balancing those two. It takes a lot of outside work to make sure Moretta is as natural as possible so that she can just show up. And it was really fun. Our last run, I had a lot of fun with her, just kind of spitting out the words and being so sassy. And it's really lovely to be playing a character that really, her whole business has to do with men, but she does not give a shit about the men. and so like that's been like really fun to just lay into. And it's a nice little release before I click my highlighter back out and start note taking as SM again. But it's this it's
a great company.
It is. It's such a great company. Like I said before, the chemistry and energy is so vibrant. And the fact that the background of this particular piece is to take place in the piazzas of Naples, and there's carnival happening, and there's excitement and new love, and there's a lot of evening scenes too. So you're under the stars, like that's all coming through. And the more and more we do it, there's like new little game playing or new choices that are leaching out through the screen too, which is it's magical. Like it really is magical. And as Claire just said too, like the company and cast we have on this, like we are such a unit. Like I picture anyone who's like a Game of Thrones fan, I picture like all of us are at like the front line of one of those big battle scenes, and we all just like move forward together and know that like we are going to slay. Like it's that vibe. Like Emily was saying earlier, like every rehearsal, or every experience you said with the DRS is like one step further to trying out new things and like conquering them. I feel like kind of microcosming that down to the rehearsal for the Rover, every rehearsal that we've done, we're kind of all like moving forward and conquering on the admin side, and then just like seeing the actors do that too. Yeah, it's been like such a fun wild ride.
And Emily's
and then
we're gonna embarrass you, Emily.
Yeah,
been killing it as Helena.
Just so good.
Yeah.
And then like you were saying earlier too, Claire, like how Congreve and many other restoration playwriters wrote the text with particular people in mind. I definitely want to shout out and mention this too with the adaptations that you were taking for all these pieces in the DRS. You are adapting them with people that you want to have on the team in mind too. So that from like an actor and an admin side too, that's so beautiful to watch, knowing that some of the words that you've written were particularly for the mouth or the person saying them. And that really rings through. And I think that's another awesome like crossover that you're doing, taking these pieces from the past and putting them in a modern light. You're doing the same process that those playwriters did. And a perfect example of that is our Ron Roman Melendez playing Wilmore. Like every word that he says as our Wilmore, I'm like, that is Ron. Like that Ron would say that, right? And like, like it's so lovely to watch. And then this project too, kind of being a sister installment with Cup of Hemlock Theatre.
Yeah.
Right. So I am also a general assistant of a Canadian Toronto-based theater company called Cup of Hemlock Theatre. And we are sort of at the end of the Rover. There will be a video of the Rover that's going to be gifted to Cup of Hemlock to put on their social media as well. And so some of the actors we have in this project particular are from Toronto or Canadian based. And so Cup of Hemlock would like to ask Claire just some questions about why you chose to do the Rover, as Claire's a guest director for Cup of Hemlock for the Rover. And yeah, we just want to kind of get more insight about why you chose to do this awesome piece. So that kicks off question number one. Like why when William R. Bartley, the artistic director of Cup of Hemlock, invited you in as our guest director, why was the Rover at the top of your list to do?
Because it's awesome.
Yeah.
Is the short answer. No, so Will had described to me that Cup of Hemlock was interested in selecting a female identifying director to direct a play written by a woman for the next in the series. That was the parameter. And I was still on a high from Way of the World. It was early August. And I was right at the beginning of the post-production process with Wesley Johnson, our editor, and I was starting to realize not only what a huge galactic process post-production was going to be, but also like how good it might be if we really dug our heels in. I was like, this could be really something special, really, really beautiful. And so I was on a restoration high, and this was before the DRS. This was before any of that had been conceptualized. This was just me as Claire thinking, okay, I'm being asked to step in and guest direct for a classical theater company that wants to spotlight women's voices. I could pick a contemporary play by a woman. There are so many brilliant ones to pick, but I was like, I'm a classical theater artist. Like, Aphra Behn was a genius, and her works are so rarely done. And the Rover Part 1 is really it's her opus. And so when Will sort of offered it to me, I was like, well, like, this could be a really great opportunity to continue working on restoration because I just had the time of my life doing Way of the World. But also really get to lift up the voice and perspective of a woman who is still in many educational contexts kind of lost to history. Her plays are not performed nearly as often as many of her male restoration counterparts. And so it was the combination of that and then just personally loving the play, really wanting the opportunity to dive into it with a company of actors. so, yeah, that was how I found my way to it. And thank goodness, because the digital restoration series as a project emerged like a few weeks later, and I realized that the two could dovetail so beautifully, and that this could be the second audio drama in that series. But ultimately I picked it because I think that Helena's and Florinda's story is timeless and moving and feministically fabulous, and that the questions that the play asks about gender politics, about rape culture, about toxic masculinity, like, they're all very prescient questions, and she's addressing real issues that continue to plague us today, and so, yeah, I just wanted the chance to roll up my sleeves and dig in.
Absolutely, yeah. Hashtag, what was it? Fantastically feminist? Is that what you said?
Fabulous. I don't think feministically
Feministically fabulous?
We're going to make it one.
That'll be a hashtag, absolutely. Very well said, and completely concur with the idea of taking a feminine voice and giving voice to these feminine characters in today's light. Like that is... Thank you, Afroben. We would not be here if it was not for you. So thank you very much. Question number 2, and this is awesome that we have Emily Garrison playing our Helena for this one too. So I'm gonna toss the hat to you after Claire answers M. So what elements or themes of this play, Claire, are you finding the most exciting to explore?
Emily hit the nail on the head earlier. These characters sound like they are living today. Like, yes, their sentences might have a few more clauses and, you know, a few more long words than we would use in our colloquial conversation, but, like, these people are living amongst us. It's a bunch of sweaty, horny 22-year-olds, right? Like, they're here, they're right here with us. They're on the UCLA campus, baby. You know, what they want is their desires for each other, but also for liberation wherever they can find it, whether it's sexual liberation, literal, like, physical liberation from their own houses, you know, liberation from societal expectation of what they're supposed to be, a liberation of thought, right? A liberation from like religious or political extremism, that desire to just be free, is so profoundly human and so important, I think, for specifically for young people. I think it is like the great end all be all of the stories of young people is young people searching for some kind of freedom or a new way of being free, a new way of freeing themselves. So so that underlying theme that I think undergirds the whole play is so accessible and so prevalent. And then there's a lot of issues that she's bringing to the forefront and shining a specifically female spotlight on, like rape culture, like the perpetuation of toxic masculinity, especially between groups of male friends, and the violence of language against women, the social permission to treat women as objects and to see them as such, the male presumption of ownership over a woman's body. I think all of those, and of course, our actors hear me talk all the time about toxic masculinity. I've probably lectured our male actors on it like 5 times now, and they've been such good sports about it. But but toxic masculinity is like runs amok in this play. It is rife, and unlike the plays written by Afrobane's contemporaries, it's not just like brushed off or laughed off. It's not treated as a sign of their wit. It's treated as a fundamental flaw of their personhoods, which I love. So all of those things for me is why the play deserves to be lifted up in 2020. But I'd love to hear from Emily, since you are sort of in the thick of things.
Exactly. Yeah. And what's your thoughts?
Yeah. I mean, everything that Claire said, I really resonate with as well. It's really an undeniable part of this play that there are just such big questions of how men and women can interact when there is one gender that has so much power and another who has none, and what that means for any sort of consensual, loving relationship.
Yeah.
In addition to that, something that as Helena, I've really been excited about figuring out, and I still don't think that I have figured it out, but something that I'm working on is this kind of like desire and fear in the same conversations. We've talked about how Helena is like 17 years old. She is super young. She, I think, really thinks that she knows everything. But when she gets into the moments where she has the choice to go run off with someone, she always like screeches on the brakes and is like, no, actually, let's do it tomorrow. Which I just think is so true and so honest. And as an actor, very juicy. Because it I think we did actually the same Shakespeare exercise
it's
with this play.
It's intentional.
With this play, and I feel like my first impression of them is always like, I'm like, okay, I've read this play a couple of times, like, what do I just see right now? And being able to work on the play, I see so much more. I think my first impression of Helena was that she was like ready to strip in front of the first man that she saw and like go for it.
Yeah.
And actually the character, I picked Julia from The Merchant of Venice, I think because I really attached onto the idea that she cross-dresses to get what she wants, which I do think is important to who she is. But I think that I think that Julia and Helena do it for different reasons.
Totally.
So I said Julia, which I definitely don't agree with now. I'm not going to say who I think that I'll say at the end of the rehearsal process, because I wanted to be surprised.
I was really surprised when you said Julia, because Julia is she's such a like introverted, gawky, kind of shy character, and Helena to me is just like, blah, like
yeah. Well, I really was attached to this idea because when I first read The Rover, I really saw Helena as she had her mind on one thing, which was having sex, and she was willing to do anything to get that.
Yeah.
And I feel like Julia does the same thing, except what she wants is different, but she does the same actions.
Sure.
But I actually think that that's not what Helena wants, is she wants freedom. And I think that she actually really, I mean, like, much to my chagrin, because I'm cynical, like, I think that she actually does really believe in love.
I think so too.
And that's a challenge, and a fun challenge to explore with Helena. You know, God, it sucks that she believes in love, you know?
It's so interesting you say that, though, because believing in love is what many of my male identifying actors have told me is like their salvation of playing these characters. They're like, if we didn't believe in love, we would never ever want to touch these characters with like a 12-foot pole, because they're so awful. But if you can, like, if they can let themselves believe that much of what their characters are doing is just like to get love, because they're so blindsided, so drop kicked by love, that they're willing to do the stupid thing in order to get it, like it becomes a little bit easier to let yourself sink into a character like that, which isn't to say that every male character, you know, it needs to be made sympathetic. I mean, my actor Jordan Beck, who's playing Blunt, is like a wonderful example. He knows exactly what Blunt is, and he's not out to justify his actions. He's not out to make him sympathetic. But the men who are playing men who end up with women and are meant to be seen as heroes, I think really like struggle a lot of the time, unless they can use their own real life, like creed that love is real and that it exists, because that, like, it creates a red line through the nonsense for them.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, so.
And this is a perfect segue, because we kind of are getting into character conversation, so segueing from themes and such. So question number 3 being, which character do you find most interesting? So I also want to pass this to Emily after Claire, but Emily, maybe just as a fun exercise, I'll ask you, like, which character aside from Helena throughout this process that you have found interesting, either working with or seeing performed as opposed to on the page. But Claire, first, a loaded question because we have a wonderful amount of characters and all with beautiful backstories. So which one through this process have you been finding most interesting?
That's a different question. If it's in this process, then that is a different question than just sort of like basically if I'm looking at the play. Because everyone in this play is interesting. Everyone. Moretta, who Jill is playing and is in only a couple of scenes, is fascinating. She is a businesswoman who looks at sex as a business and has a really fascinating perspective on men and women and gender relations because for her, it's all about money. Which is a really, like, we could do a whole psychological, like, exploration of what has turned Moretta into the woman that we see in this play. There's a courtesan who's actually a con artist named Lucetta, who's the one that hoodwinks Blunt, tricks him into coming back to her house on the pretense of, having sex, and then basically drops him down a trapdoor and steals everything, including all of his clothes. And she and her husband have this really interesting, like, dom-sub partner relationship, and they basically, like, this is a thing they do as a couple. It's like she seduces men, and then instead of sleeping with them, she steals everything, and then they sleep together. It's just really interesting. So, like, Lucetta and Filippo are fascinating to me. They deserve their own origin story. I will say, and this is bad feminist of me. I really did enter this play being like, wow, Wilmore sucks. I don't really care about him. I care about Helena a lot. I really want to, like, lift up her voice and her story, but I don't know how to find my way into giving two flicks about her about her love interest. Because he is the classic rake. At least that's what I thought. I thought of him as the Harry Horner. I thought of him as a Dorimant. But he's not. He's Afrabane's response to that, which is something very, very different. And we've already shouted out Ron Ramon Melendez, but Ron, you're brilliant, like unfairly so brilliant, and
he's so good.
He's so good.
It is so intimidating to have scenes with him.
Talk to me. No, I hear you. I feel the same way, and I don't even ever talk. I don't think my character ever actually talks to him, and I feel the same way. Yeah, devastatingly good, a beautiful craftsman, an amazing human being, but just like,
so good.
I mean, I don't want to say he's talented. I hate it when people describe actors as talented because it takes work, it takes craftsmanship, it takes dedication, and also it takes a certain humility and a willingness to, like, be a generous, open-hearted person. But he is that. He is not the talented actor. He is the good actor. And I am so honored and just dumbfounded to be working with him. And he has, like, cracked open Wilmore for me. And that's partly because when he loves, when his characters love, he just lets himself love. It's also because we have three Spanish speakers playing Wilmore, Angelica, and Helena. So Ron has helped me and Sarah spearhead a translation of a lot of the lovers scenes into these bilingual, like, dueling verbal sparring sessions where the characters are code switching. They're going in and out of English and Spanish. Pretty much any time Wilmore slips into Spanish, I'm like, all right, I understand it now. I forgive everything. You're great. I would also run away with you.
I know he really has that, like, pirate quality. Totally. Like, yes, I will run away with you.
Yeah, 100%. But also, like, he has made me newly appreciate Wilmore, and, like, and the depth and complexity and nuance of that character, his intrepid loyalty and love for his friends, even though he is often bad at showing it, there is a fundamental fealty that he feels, especially to Belleville, that has been, like, beautiful to watch blossom. And he feels deeply, and he thinks deeply, and he's incisive, and he's perceptive, and he reads people, and as someone who also reads people, I really resonate with that. And he just genuinely is dazzled by Helena, just completely charmed by her, not in a creepy way and not in an exploitative way, but in a genuinely heartfelt way. He melts around her, and I would not, and that's not the character, that's the person playing the character, right, that makes me see that and makes me hear that. I didn't before we started working on the project. So I really do love Wilmore now, and I did not expect that to happen. I expected that I would love working with Ron. I did not expect that I would actually fall hard for the character itself.
Right.
Also, I mean, every single female character is brilliant. Really, I feel like I could write a spin-off play about any one of the female characters in the Rover. Yep. So Wilmore and the ladies, that's my
yeah, or like another Netflix series. I'll add it to my list. Like we'll do a little Netflix spin-off, Way of the World. This will be the Netflix spin-off for the Rover. Mm-hmm. Love that. And then Emily, like with your thoughts, like either character coming off the page into the room, or just characters that Helena interacts with, like what has been kind of an interesting thought to share character-wise with you?
Yeah, I mean, honestly, I was going to say Wilmore as well. And I think that's because Ron is just he's such a brilliant actor, and he just brings something that is so soft to this character that projects so much hardness, and that's just intoxicating as an audience member, as a scene partner. Also, I would say that sometimes his dog is in his Zoom calls.
Ron's dog, not Wilmore's. Ron's dog.
Oh, yeah, Ron's dog. There are no dogs in this Zoom show. But Claire, maybe we should do a dog show and have... But yeah, so I actually was going to say Wilmore, but and for all of the reasons that we've talked about, he's really interesting, and I think that Ron really has understood so much about him that I never saw when I read when I read his character, and I think it's been really helpful for me as Helena to see him learn those things, because again, upon first read, my big question was like, what does Helena see in him? Because he breaks his promises, he cheats on her, he doesn't do the things that he's going to say to do, and she just keeps going back to him. But I think that like we find moments, Helena and Wilmore have moments where Helena really sees straight through him. And I think that that's something that Helena does, because she just believes, and she sees him, and she says like, no, I have seen the inside of him and I can grab onto it. And she knows that she can do that because she has always had to be the one who, like, she's always had to do things on her own. And actually I say she's always had to do things on her own, I think, because no one takes her seriously. We've actually had a different conversation about how she's never really had to have responsibilities for things, but no one takes her seriously. She's just like the youngest sibling who got like shut away somewhere. So she's really had to fend for herself sometimes. But beyond Wilmore, I also think that Angelica Bianca is just fascinating. And she is such a she is such an owner of her own sexuality in a way that is so fascinating. And she's never really shamed for it in a way that like many other characters are afraid of happening to them, and I think that's something really cool that Afrobane has done.
Yeah.
Well, I guess and she does suffer for being a prostitute or a courtesan, but she really is like, there's nothing wrong with this. Why should I be ashamed of this, even when other characters do hold it against her. And so I've really loved seeing that perspective, and
yeah.
The longest French scene in Afrobane's play is a scene between Wilmore, Helena, and Angelica, where Helena is dressed as a boy. In our script, it's also the longest French scene, although I've pared it down a bit. And I call it the Bermuda Love Triangle because it's just insanity for like 6 pages. But watching the three of you do that is such a never-ending joy, Emily, because I mean, quite apart from the fact that Spanish, the through line of Spanish makes everything 10 times sexier, but also like it's like a collision of 3 brilliant minds, and they're brilliant in different ways. They all have a different kind of smarts, right? Angelica has a kind of sexual savvy. Wilmore has like the lived experience, right? He's got the world weary world experience, especially of women. And Helena has this like really youthful but like incisive, penetrating intelligence where she can just like she just understands people. She really understands Wilmore, um, and she like forensically collects data about people so that she understands how they operate, how they work. And it's like these three freaky genius kids like just like collide on the streets of Italy, and the result is this amazing like three-way battle of wits. And it's such a great scene. And Sarah Linette's like beautiful Angelica, like absolutely dazzling. So yeah, those scenes are pretty special.
Mm-hmm. Great. And our final fourth question. Now, we've kind of already touched on the content for this answer, but we'll delve a little bit further in. So, Claire, if you could play a character in this play, who would it be and why? Now, you did mention you are playing Valeria. You want to talk a little bit about that, and maybe if you weren't playing Valeria, who you would want to be?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah, so this is sort of a strange thing that has now happened a couple of times. With Way of the World, we had a different actor slotted to play Millamant, who had to drop out at the last minute for totally legitimate reasons. And I did not have time to find a replacement that could commit to the hours, so I did it myself, which was a transcendent joy, but one that I didn't really feel like I deserved. And then with Rover, we had an amazing actor lined up to play Helena, also had to drop out at the last minute for totally legitimate reasons. And Emily Garrison, who was slated to play Valeria, the girl's cousin, blessedly stepped up. I think it was like 2 days before, it was like right before first read. And you were like, yes, of course, happily, like, I will play Helena, absolutely. Because you're amazing. And so I am the sort of de facto swing for female characters just by virtue of the fact that I'm going to be in every rehearsal anyway as the director. And so I became Valeria, the girl's cousin. What was sort of weird and continues to be weird about that is that I knew Emily, or I thought Emily was going to be playing Valeria, and I knew Emily's strengths as an actor, and I knew how brilliant she was, and I knew that I wanted to punch up the female perspective in this play, so I wanted to add new text to a lot of the female characters, especially Valeria, who ends up kind of saving the day in a way, kind of saving Florinda from her fate with Blunt. And I had written this kind of mini monologue for Valeria, which is a reflection on home and the fact that women don't own property. That was a reference to Virginia Woolf's A Room of One's Own, which in itself references Afrobane. And I had written a lot of new text for Valeria. A lot of new text, thinking Emily Garrison would be the one to say it all. Then Emily became Helena, I became Valeria, and suddenly all this text that I had written for her, I was saying. And so I'm having this really strange experience of performing my own original writing. It's restoration-esque. It's Afrobane-esque, but it's me. And I've never really had that experience before. Like, I've read things in one-offs that I've written before, but I've never like played a character that I added text to.
Right.
And it does. I wanted to explain this today because I understand that for anyone who doesn't know that background, it will seem like a colossal and unforgivable vanity stunt that I have like written a lot of new text for a character I am playing. But that wasn't what was supposed to happen. I wrote it all for Emily because Emily's brilliant, and I thought that she would do gorgeous work with it. And I still believe that she would have if she had played Valeria. So, as much as I love Valeria, and as much as I love this character, and I think she's a wonderful gust of fresh air, especially into the sisters who can often like needle each other. And she's also very sexually liberated, or at least
right.
she wants to be, which is also really interesting to me. But I've always wanted to actually play Helena. Like, if I could play a character in this play, I would play her. Even though I don't think I'm good enough, so it's a very good thing that I'm not. I do not think I'm I do not think I have what it takes to play Helena, but I love her. I find her totally fascinating. And so, yeah, I watch Emily in wonder every night, because she is just, you are just working wonders with that character. So yeah, that would be my like blue sky someday. I don't know. In my head, I'll play her. What about you, Em?
Love that. Yeah.
Well, what's interesting is like going into moving up into Helena, I was very excited because I'm never cast as ingenues typically. I think that people like typically I am more typically cast as like the evil woman, like the Marwood character. So I thought it was going to be a really exciting challenge to play this kind of like green, innocent girl who like just wants to fall in love. And I think that what's been fun about that is I've really found her rebellious side.
Yeah.
Which I really relate to. And I think has helped me connect with her because I kind of said earlier, like, I'm definitely a cynic when it comes to, I think, love stories on stage and tend to believe that no one actually loves each other and, like, nothing is real. But that just can't be true for Helena. That's just not true for her. She really does believe. So before discovering all of that about Helena, though, I think the character that I was most excited about was Angelica Bianca.
Yeah.
Because she's just awesome. And wonderful.
Amazing. We visually lost Jill, but I don't know if we lost her audio. Jill, are you there? She may be trying to reconnect.
Claire, I have a question in the meantime, which is, what is Valeria's Enneagram type?
Okay, weirdly, I've had a lot of, I've been thinking about this a lot. So I tried to type everyone at the front half, like before we started rehearsals for both projects, because it was a useful way for me to get inside their heads. Oddly, and I did not come to this lightly, but I think she might actually be my type. I think she might be an 8-wing 7. Because she's a mover. She's a doer, right? Like, even though she doesn't have as much text, in terms of the actions that she takes, she is kind of the challenger. She dresses up in masquerade, goes out with the girls, sneaks out of the house, goes out into the street, flirts with the first hot guy she sees, but also, once she knows that her cousin Florinda's love, Belleville, is like out in the crowds, she sort of joins forces with Florinda to try to tempt him, to try to pull like a, let's pretend to be, like sexy hookers who want to hook up with him, and let's test the validity of his love. And she kind of spearheads that. She actually ignores the guy that she likes so that she can like help Florinda have this test. There's Jill. And so she, and then of course at the end of the play, she hides in the shadows, watches all of the men go into Blunt's house, and then sort of bides her time and waits until she has a kind of plan to step forth and free her cousin and like hold the men accountable, put their feet to the fire. She locks their governess in a coat closet, which I feel like you only do if you have a streak of dominator in you, because that is a power move. But also she loves fun, right? She has this 7-wing of like, I want to have fun, I want to have sex, I think this hot English guy is really into me, like, I don't care that he's an English soldier and that, like, I'm not supposed to like the English, like, I think he's great and I want to run away with him. And so, weirdly, I think she might actually be my type, and I didn't expect that, but yeah, I think she's an 8-wing 7. What's Helena?
I originally thought that she was a 7-wing 8, and I stick by the fact that she's a 7.
Sure.
I'm starting to think that she could be a 7-wing 6. But what I love about the Enneagram is like it really can be, like, I think you can make the argument that any character could be any type. It's just like what it is that you latch onto them.
Yeah.
And I think what I'm really my way into Helena right now is really her fear. And so I think that I'm really seeing the 6 come out of her.
Totally.
But she also is very pushy. And she gets what she wants.
Yeah.
So I think that she could be an 8 either. But definitely I stand by that her core is a 7.
Love that.
Mm-hmm.
That's great. Yeah. So, oh gosh. And we should do like a whole, I could just type all the restoration characters. That could be its own episode. I'll just sit down with all of my texts and I'll type everyone.
Yes.
But what's coming after, we have like so much coming after Rover that is exciting, and Emily and Jill are both a huge part of that. So we are about to, mid-November, we're going to launch into George Etheridge's dastardly satire, The Man of Mode. And I keep telling Jill that this one really scares me. This is the most nervous I've been for any audio drama I've ever directed, especially as part of the DRS, because this play is mean, man. It's just mean. It's mean-spirited. The characters are really mean. Like, they're mean in Way of the World, but they're, like, refined. Nobody is refined in Man of Mode. It's just, like, it's nasty, it's bitter, it's extremely sexual, but not in a particularly empowering or consensual or, like, enriching way. The human connection seems to be missing. Those nerve endings seem to have been severed, and so this play scares the crap out of me, because I'm actually the opposite of Emily. I'm not a cynic, and actually I always try to find the real love in any play, even if it's not romantic love. I always try to find, like, where's our true love, whether it's a familial love or a love between friends or whatever. Like, where's that human connection, and then I try to, like, spotlight it. Because I do believe in love. I don't want to. I wish I could be a cynic, but I can't. So, Man of Mode is really hard for me because it seems to be asking me as a director to be cynical, and I don't want to be. And so I'm I'm excited to work with a company of actors to dive in and get inside these characters' heads, and I think they will help me understand where the love is, and we will find ways to excavate those stories together, and really latch onto those connections where we find them. But I'm currently having a really hard time steeling myself for how harsh this play is and how atrociously Dorimant treats the women in his life. And he gets a preternaturally happy ending. So Man of Mode is coming up. But fortunately, Emily and her wonderful partner Duncan are playing Amelia and Harry, who are like the one source of authentic love in the play. They're this really young couple that adore each other. And they're in this horrible, awkward love triangle because his dad also likes her. And so, like, the son is sitting there like, oh my God, Dad, stop. It's like the dad trying to make trying to get a stepmother for his son that's, like, younger than the son. Like, that's that love triangle. So the amazing Simon Kaplan is going to be playing Belair, the father, and I just think those scenes are going to be marvelous. Duncan is going to do a British accent, so the two of them are going to be English together, and it'll just be marvelous. But that one is coming up next, and that'll be that'll be an interesting process. And then in January and February, we are embarking on the sprawling and amazing and, to me, terrifying and exhilarating Stratagem project, which is 2 audio dramas in rep, 1 company of actors doing both plays. We will rehearse them like on alternating nights, and that is Farquhar's The Bow Stratagem and Cooley's The Bells Stratagem. And I will actually, this time, unlike the other 2 times when acting was an accident that I fell into because people dropped out, people have already dropped out like months in advance, and so I am instead preparing to act. So I will be performing in both of those plays, which I'm really, really excited about. I'm probably makes me a bad person. It's probably very, very vain and selfish, but I am super excited because these are 2 of my favorite plays. So that's how we'll close out. Jill is stage managing every single freaking project.
I was just about to say, my multicolored pen is at the ready, especially for that Stratagem project, because the overlap, like, there is going to be, and I honestly wish, so I am back. There was a technical glitch, as does happen, and so to be completely real and honest, I have backup laptops if need be. So I had my mom's laptop at the ready. I was like, okay, we're going to try this again.
Yep.
It is so interesting, like, how you just adopt this, okay, great game plan, as opposed to tech crashing in the past and being like, oh my goodness, what is happening? You're like, great, what is the game plan? So another component of my game plan, I'm taking a little bit more of a traditional lens in taking down notes. Usually I type my notes, but because the Zoom call is open, the private chat option of Zoom is where the actors will connect with me.
Yeah.
With my SM team, I am texting them if need be. I'm like, I'm gonna handwrite, jot down notes. So that's been a really interesting journey, and I just wish people could see my notebooks at the end, because I understand it fully. The color coding does not follow any legend except my brain, so that works. But I will tell you, this wonderful 4-colored pen really changes my life. Just so everyone gets a little bit of a scope into stage managing these lovely giant works. Color coding is key. So I'm already prepping the stratagem project. I'm gonna get some highlighters involved in here, and maybe even different colored pens on top of the color coding pen. So
it's gonna be intense, and a lot of amazing actors are coming back for stratagem project. Like stratagem project is just, despite the fact that it scares the crap out of me, I'm also so excited to sail to the finish line alongside some of these extraordinary humans that I just love a lot. Like Ron, like Sarah, like Ben Apple. I just love these people, and I'm really excited to keep working with them. So, there's like, in the midst of all of this chaos, there is just so much to be grateful for. And right at the top of my list are both of you ladies. So, yeah, thank you for all that you have done, are doing, will continue to do. To anyone out there who is thinking about giving The Way of the World a listen on Monday, whether you are a Patreon subscriber that will be listening to the whole play, the whole 2-hour play, or someone who's going to go onto the podcast and listen to episode 1, act 1, you will hear classical Baroque music that is written by our amazing editor, Wesley Johnson, and recorded to sound as if it's on harpsichord and like string instruments. He's basically written original music that evokes the Baroque era. It's extraordinary. You'll hear me narrating, and then you'll be sort of welcomed into the world of London in 1700. There are sound effects. There are stereophonics. I staged the whole play, and then I described it beat for beat to Wesley. So if the left door leads into the card playing room and the right door leads into the main foyer, you'll hear a different door handle. You'll hear different footsteps. Every character has their own footstep pattern. You'll hear the footsteps approaching either from the right or the left, so you will have that stereophonic experience as if you are in the room with these people. There's music, there's sound effects, there's layering. Characters laugh at each other, scoff at each other, make sounds. Jill has listened to it, so can probably give a better, or at least a fresh perspective on what it's like.
It is transcendent. It is so magical. And like what Claire is describing, it is so right. At first I was like, oh my God, whoa, only one of my headphones is hearing that door. And then looking at the text cross-referencing, I'm like, whoa, that was the right door.
Yeah.
Like there's so many cool tidbits of like natural sounds that the actors have in response to the actor that you may miss, but like it is piped in purposefully. And then little tiny sounds of like a door chiming or whatever, again, that's piped in. So each episode you're expecting more magic, and it unveils itself. It's quite beautiful. Mm-hmm. And just to speak to that too, like Claire, you being at the helm of this project is so beautiful in itself. Like at a time where, all of us actors and audience members, we are very much, like you said, at such a bit of a standstill darkness right now. And this whole project, and then transposing it to being this magical adventure that we can all listen to and partake in, is something so special during these times. And so I genuinely thank you from the bottom of my heart for bringing me along this journey, both exercising my admin side and my creative acting side too. This is just, it's wonderful to be in a room, a virtual room, albeit, but a room nonetheless, for 6 months with packed with inspiring people, facts, experiences at a time when, the world is pretty dark, and we're shining some light on it. And I'm grateful for that. So thank you for being our captain along this ride. Yeah. You're very welcome.
I think that's all I have. So thank you both so much for joining me today. It was so great to see both of you. I'll see you tomorrow.
Yes.
Woo!
At rehearsal.
Thank you, Claire, for this lovely tea time talk.
Yeah, thanks for joining.
And we even did get some gossip about our fellow castmates in.
We did.
We did.
I think we did this correctly. So if you have something to drink, I would say just hold it up with your pinky out, and we'll go out, the right way. There we go. Beautiful.
Indeed.
Sláinte. I love you both. To everyone out there, please consider giving Way of the World a listen, either on patreon.com/Sweet Tea Shakes or our podcast, The Sweet Tea Shakespeare Hours. It drops Monday at 1 p.m. Eastern Time. I'm so excited for the world to hear it. To everyone who was a part of it, cast, crew, creatives, I love you all. I am so grateful for you. We did it, team. We made it. So, forward ho, DRS, and both of you have an amazing Saturday.
Bye. Thanks so much, Claire.
Bye.